Okay, so we're starting the discussion session called Mental Health as a Social and Political Issue, as a follow-up to the keynote speech that we had to discuss the question of mental health further, to critically discuss it. And I wanted to begin with a short question to the audience, but can you hear me? Oh. But the audience is not, I don't know, it's not really there, but I just wanted to start with a blitz question to the audience. Just when you hear the term mental health, what are the words that come to mind? Could you just share a bit like your thoughts out loud? What are the words that come to mind when you hear the term mental health?
Bad.
What? Bad? Bad. What else? Neurodivergence.
Yeah, it's also mad.
Oh, mad. What are the things that come to mind? Sick? Anyone else? Okay. Well, that's a very calm start, and it's very windy. It can be a bit messy. Sorry. Okay. Okay, anyway, let's begin. I just wanted to collect some buzzwords to represent mental health discourse, but yeah. So I'd like to start with a... Okay. Okay, so I'm going to start with the opening, a short introduction into our topic from my side as a moderator, and then I'll present the panelists briefly. So we talk and hear about mental health more than ever, and that's a positive development. However, it is also important how we talk about mental health. And in this panel, we raise the question, what is typically overlooked when discussing mental health? Feminism has taught us that personal matters are often related to political and social matters. But do we recognize it in the case of mental health? In our own mental health, in mental health of our families and communities. Most of us know from experience that stress at work, competition pressures, loneliness, material insecurity, as well as childhood trauma, experiences of violence and discrimination negatively affect our well-being and can make us ill. Empirical studies consistently show a connection between socioeconomic stressors and worse mental health. So, some things that make us stressed and miserable are clearly not just personal problems, they're societal ones too. It's obvious and intuitive, although somehow has become controversial in popular discussions on mental health nowadays. That's why today we want to move beyond the individualized biomedical perspective and instead use a social model, as was used in the disability panel already, as an approach to mental health. The social model of mental health emphasizes the role of social and environmental factors in developing and maintaining mental health issues. Conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age fundamentally impact their mental health. This approach recognizes the impact of social determinants such as inequality, poverty, discrimination, and social isolation on mental health, and emphasizes the need for social and policy interventions to address these factors. So, our main question today is how mental health is related to social and political issues. After having identified some collective sources of distress in this panel, we will try to seek to find some collective tools to address these. In other words, we'll try to answer the question, how can we politically mobilize on the issue of mental health? I'm very excited to have very cool panelists today. A very nice team of collective of panelists from different backgrounds. We'll have three fascinating panelists. Marivi Bauer comes from Germany for this festival, studied psychology, and has a special interest in social and environmental psychology. She is a co-host of a social analytic psychology podcast. In addition, Marivi is training to be a mediator with a focus on power sensitivity and self-organized groups. She is also a board member and working student of the association which promotes social ecological transformation at universities. Hello.
Hi.
Paulius Garmus. Paulius is a practicing child and adolescent psychotherapist, has worked many years in the UK and recently returned to Lithuania. Welcome back. Paulius studied bachelor in psychology in Lithuania, Master of Science in Child and Adolescent Psychology in the Netherlands, and Master of Arts in Child and Adolescent Psychotherapy in the UK. In addition, Paulius has 4 years of experience as a support worker with people with severe autism. Clinical interest aside, Paulius is concerned about the place of psychotherapy in modern society. Paulius has written a fascinating article that criticizes the lack of political activism among mental health professionals in Gyvenimas Brangus website platform, and he criticizes mental health professionals' distance from the rest of society. And finally, Elena Gasiulytė, expert by experience in the field of mental health activist, as well as critic, and a writer. Living with what psychiatry calls borderline personality disorder, she searched for a less pathologizing term and landed on a more empowering term, mega emotions, as suggested by one of her best friends. Elena criticizes the psychiatric system and emphasizes the similarities between people with and without diagnosis. And Elena has her newsletter where she does exactly that. Recommend. And my name is Monika Višnevska. I'll be your moderator in this discussion panel. I'm soon finishing my master's in psychology in Germany. In the last years, I've been active member of progressive movements in Lithuania, as well as organizer of KOMBINATAS festival from the start. And also, I recently finished an internship in a psychosocial center for traumatized refugees, or refugees with who experienced trauma. And this was also an experience that made it very clear to me how certain political decisions can cause very intimate experiences of distress and suffering. So I thought I would mention that here. So we'll have discussion panel with Paulius, Elena, and Marivi, and later on we'll have 30 minutes for open discussion together. So mind your questions, and we'll have hopefully enough time for that. So first, okay. Once again, do you want to share any buzzwords that come to mind when you hear the term mental health before we begin? Okay, you know what?
Self-help.
What? Self-help. Trauma. Audience is shy. Anyway, let's begin talking ourselves then about the mental health discourse. Question exactly on that. What's the discourse on mental health in your field? Because you have a bit different backgrounds and environments that you're from. So please share your experience about the discourse on mental health in your field, and what are the problems that you observe. 5-7 minutes each. Who would like to begin? Elena.
So yeah, I was kind of nervous that, I used to be a very good public speaker, and then I wasn't. So now I aspire to be a very good public reader. So I'm going to read from my phone, which I thought was weird, but now because of the wind, I think it's so good that I didn't bring any papers. So I guess my field would be the internets and the social media. And as Monika already mentioned, nowadays it is becoming more and more saturated with mental health content, especially those listicle type Instagram posts like how to spot a narcissist in your life, or 5 signs you have a personality disorder. So I hate those. Hate is a very strong word, so I strongly dislike those, because I think that these topics are so much more complex and nuanced than that, and what I myself try to offer is more deep dives and critical analysis and sometimes unexpected twists on those topics. In my work, I generally care most about quality authenticity, and normalization of various aspects that make up the human experience. I like to say that all of us really do have one condition in particular, and that is being a human person. And the more severe that condition is, the better, I find. Don't get me wrong, I find it fabulous that we as a society are now talking more about those things, sharing more. It becomes less of a taboo. It's all fine and dandy, but the not so silver lining of that, I think, is that this gives way to the oversimplification of things, but also over-pathologization of everything. If you watch TikToks or scroll Instagram long enough, you would definitely be convinced that you have a diagnosis or 2 or 5. I guess it has happened to you people as well. And the thing is that maybe you do, and maybe you don't. That is not the thing I'm talking about. The thing is, I find it dangerous, especially for young people, to view everything in their lives and experiences as a symptom of something. Because then it is very easy to make a diagnosis or some kind of disorder your whole identity. Like I was joking in my own Instagram stories a couple of days ago, I used to wear all black, but now I feel more drawn to florally dresses, light dresses, and I want to change my whole wardrobe. So what is that? The desire to often change one's appearance radically is said to be a symptom of borderline personality disorder, which is exactly what I have, apparently. The internet is full of memes about BPD girlies one day having their hair pink, and then the next day they have it blue, and then in a week they go bald and stuff like that. But what I'm asking is this a symptom, or is this a natural human desire to change and express it in your appearance? It's a funny and silly example, and I know that. But I think it is very telling, emblematic about what is happening in our world right now, and on the internet. So I think labels and diagnoses are useful. That's exactly what was talked before in the panel of Ian, that they might be useful for example, for finding your community, which is what I like to do with my work and my newsletter. And also you can, for example, I found dialectical behavior therapy through researching BPD, and that has proven to be super helpful for me, but that's that. I do not really need now to have this label affect everything that I do and affect how I live. So in fact, that's also harmful if we think about the consequences, the very real life consequences of having a label, because, well, in a workplace, for example, right, would you say that you are suicidal? Or in a court, like you are having a divorce case and you are dealing with a custody of giving, like, children, basically giving children to one or the other parent, and one of them has a label. How does that turn out? And it would be really nice to live in a world where such things don't matter, but they very much do. So diagnoses really create a lot of problems. And also, I often say that I miss people saying, I'm sad. Today I'm sad. It's not my depressive episode started today. Today I was fucking nervous to talk here, and now my hand is shaking. So what is it? Is it my anxiety disorder, or am I nervous because I'm talking to people, right? So where did the good old sadness go is my question, and what does it make blues then? Is it music by and for depressed people? Maybe. Another thing is spiritual capitalism that goes hand in hand with the psychiatry system failing people constantly. And then those vulnerable people oftentimes turn to various cult-like leaders and healers and light workers, which are offering massively overpriced essential oils and coaching sessions and exploiting the very real pain that many of us have. And I also observed many influencers that are talking about mental health always arriving at the same conclusion. So now you know what a narcissist is, right? After reading my posts, now you know which disorder you have, and the solution is actually very simple. You go to therapy, and here's a promo code to a therapist I know. I very rarely see them going beyond that. And in all seriousness, my readers write me messages like, yeah, I've started therapy if I could afford it, and that is a very big question, but then what? My life didn't change in an instant. I still have to live inside my brain. What do I do on a daily basis? How do I live the life that would be healthier for me? I have gone to the same therapist for years. I know all the therapy language, and I can psychoanalyze myself all right, but what else, you know? I do understand that therapy is business, and it is beneficial to therapists to keep the person on their couch as long as possible because it means steady income. But most people have the desire to move beyond that, and they are not offered practical tools because, frankly, those tools would be entirely something else. And I think that we are going to talk about that a little bit later. So yeah, those are the problems I see, apart from the big one that I'm going to do my deep dive in. So thank you.
I'm next. Let's do it. I'm nervous too. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, thank you.
Are you nervous, Monica? What about you?
Super nervous.
Okay, well, there you go. Yeah, there are a lot of physical symptoms and ways of body expressing stress. Sweat, numbness, tingling, gripping on microphones, stronger than you would need to actually, and all kinds. Yeah, one reaction to what Elena said that sort of resonates with my work is, you know, I see a lot of young people, and I get to hear something along the lines of, you know, I got beaten up, and then because I have ADHD, I got angry. I didn't just get angry for getting beaten up, but you know, there is that. But yeah, okay, there's that pathology aspect in there. So we are over pathologized, and a lot of things that are normal and human are seen as certain kind of labels and weaknesses. But we can kind of understand that as well to a degree, because we do need words to explain what's happening with us. So all those labels in some way provide that to us. Okay, but that's just my reaction to Elena's bit. So from my perspective, when I think of the discourse in my field, I have to say that the discourse, like in the field of psychotherapy, is just like the political discourse is very much underdeveloped. So to think in numbers, for example, there, you know, I'm also a little bit more knowledgeable in the UK context than I'm knowledgeable in the Lithuanian one, but there's one union only, psychotherapy and counseling union in the UK, that unites psychotherapists and counselors, and the sort of membership there is really quite poor. So you have the annual membership event with 20 people, and the last event I attended, we only had maybe 4 or 5 people, and all burnt out and all tired. And I myself came from my main job in the school, and then I went to see my private client, and then I came late to that meeting, and we were just sort of finding some sort of companionship in each other, and we were not really talking any political points, but just being with each other. And really very few therapists joined that union. Other than that, in the sort of social circles of therapists and counselors, I often have that feeling of lack of political activism and lack of just political interest, actually. And that's why I wrote that article that Monica mentioned. And I wrote that article using a kind of a provocative tone on purpose. I was mindful of that. And the idea was to send it to as many therapists as I know, and just to sort of get a reaction from them. And what I expected to get was some sort of anger, like, hey, you're accusing us here, or something like that. But then I was surprised, but because the reaction was mostly like, yeah, we know, yeah, that's that. And they just like added some more facts to the story that I provided in the article, and that was that. And so there isn't an anger there. There isn't much anger. There's just it is kind of a passive sort of sentiment. So really, the discourse is very much underdeveloped, and there are many reasons for it. There's lots of loneliness in the profession of psychotherapy and counseling and psychologists. In private practice, people work separately and individually, and they're not necessarily coming together. Like for example, when I work in a school and then teachers are on a strike, I don't belong to the teachers union, so I'm not going to that strike. So I'm just separate being there, and I might not be connected to other school psychologists or school counselors or whatever the title is at that point. So there's lots of separation. And in those moments when counselors and therapists can come together, then the political interest does arise, and you can start talking about things. But mainly, within the field of psychotherapy, there is a bit of aversion to psychiatry and some of the labels among psychotherapists. I think there's a bit of friction between psychotherapy and psychiatry, and I would say that psychotherapists in general are a little bit skeptical of the short-term therapy, like 7-session therapy and that kind of thing. But there's just not much frustration there, not much anger to bring people together, to make people talk, to get people to come out and sort of demand something. And there's some really striking facts. Like this last year in the UK, we had so many strikes of all kinds of professions. So you had the transport workers striking, many days. You had airport workers striking. You had nurses striking. You had so many different strikes, and one of the main demands was money. Like they were not getting paid enough. But that fight is a big struggle, and they don't get what they asked for, but maybe they meet halfway. Maybe they had half of what they asked for or something like that. But with therapists and counselors, for example, counselors are paid way less than all of these professionals mentioned, and they don't even demand, and the society doesn't even know that they're underpaid to such a degree. So there is not that inner frustration there. It's not alive. Like there's a lack of fire.
Thank you. Marivi?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation first, and thank you for all being here. I'm still thinking a lot about the keynote of Ian Parker. Thank you also for that. And now that you talked about like the erection of the psychiatrists, I can relate, as I studied psychology, that it was not enough for me in the university to just learn about that on the level, on the personal level. Like I was in the climate movement at that moment. Now I'm the climate justice movement, and as an activist, I was always being like, so, but where is the environment? So we are talking about individual factors, but that's it? Like what? And so I started with a few other people around Germany, a podcast. It was kind of a COVID project, so yeah. So it, some of them I have still haven't seen in like real life, but one of them is also here. Thank you, Leonie, for being here too. And in this podcast, we talk about political and societal topics. I'm always with like a psychological perspective, because psychology is so much more than sitting on a couch, and so much more than therapy, even though it is a big and a very important part, of course. And the people we talked to, they were from very different sections. For example, they were like psychotherapists, activists, politicians, movie makers, psychological researchers, and they were in like areas like housing, like we talked about awareness as a trend, financial inequality, and pro-environmental behavior. So very, very, very different topics, and its consequences on mental health, of course. And it gives me hope to see in how many areas there are ideas created and action taken, even though it's slow. And also being here in Lithuania is so nice to see and to be and to get connected. All of our guests often like ended with the conclusion the psychological perspective is not enough. We have to take collective actions. We have to think about collective solutions, raise awareness, organizing, and also we need concrete political measures, like for example the reduction of working hours. So, I mean, I probably don't have to tell you that, as many of you are from the activist point of view here, but yeah, that was always a conclusion. And what I want to stress out also, and what we talked about in other panels, was the importance of time. When we talked with the people, there was always the thing, who has time to do what? Who has the time to go to therapy? Who has the time to get education, to even know about mental health issues? Who has the time next to labor and reproductive work for free time, and in which quality? And do you feel like you have control of your time? How much time budget do you spend on like mental load? So there were also like this thing of self-work here in the buzzword section, and do you have the time to do that? So I would also like to ask you, how much do you feel that you have enough free quality time in comparison to your labor or your productive work you're doing? Maybe you can, if you feel you have enough of that free time, maybe you can raise your hand. I would be interested in seeing how many people of you feel that way. Can you repeat the question? Oh yeah, of course. Like, do you feel in comparison to your labor, your productive work, that you have free quality time? Enough free quality time. Okay,
I would say yes, but I don't have a job, so.
Yeah. I mean, not only labor, also reproductive work, political work. Yeah, but okay, I saw some hands, but also many hands not raised, so maybe some of you didn't understand the question, which is also fine. But yeah, so time is a thing, and me myself as an activist in the climate justice movement, I also see the privilege of taking time and taking a break, for example. And that's what I want to stress out. So the intercombination also of structural discrimination and our time use. And also about that we need a wider understanding of psychology, that a psychological perspective is only should come together with political efforts, and that we all should reflect on, also as like me myself as an activist in the hustle culture I'm in, and what that makes with the mental load we're in.
Thank you so much. I must say I share a lot of frustrations that you mentioned, like from the practitioner side. I've observed practice of mental health professionals as internship, and I've noticed similar frustrations, especially where I was doing my internship in the psychosocial center with refugees, and the frustration that people have, like, for example, mental health crisis and suicide crisis when they're about to be deported, and things like that constantly happen, and just some sort of hopelessness in the important but limited impact that you can have as a mental health specialist in such contexts which have very clear environmental factors. I resonate with that, and with when it comes to mental health discourse, for sure. And from the student point of view, also experienced the lack of critique from the student side, and generally just very strong focus on career and this productivism among students, because students that make it to psychology masters are often already privileged kids who then can perform, and they do perform, but a lot of them are super stressed out and don't have the time for other things, and there is not much space in studies to critically reflect the assumptions that psychological theory in practice makes. But I was very thankful to have opportunity to study in Germany in more of a interdisciplinary psychology program, and there we had chance to learn and critically reflect on the also Western Eurocentrist assumptions very deeply rooted in psychology, which is, I think, a very important aspect that I just wanted to mention, because most of the theory and research comes from West, and they always have certain assumptions about what persons are and how they should be. So that was also a very interesting thing that I never heard of being mentioned at all, or and psychology being presented as some sort of natural science, which I think it isn't. So that's just a short comment from my side.
So it's like often for rich, white, old men. Yeah.
There's also a term, psychology is weird. There was a very famous psychologist who made an article in 2010 and made a meta-analysis on studies in psychology. I forgot the name, but the article is very famous and was called Psychology is Weird. So weird stands for Western, educated, industrialized, democratic, and rich. So psychology is based on these samples, and mainly college student samples from US, and has the ambition to generalize to the universal functioning of humans, which is obviously very limited from the starting from such basis. So, but let's move on to our main question about associations between societal factors and mental health. A bit of a deep dive from different perspectives. So the question is, how do societal and political matters affect mental health? I know that you each wanted to choose a certain aspect, so please, who would like to start?
Well, maybe I can just ask another questions. If we talk about how they are related, I'd rather ask how could they not be related? Yeah. The moment, the moment that we get kicked out of the womb of a person, then the structural factors are kicking in. And we always divide in the psychology between the individual and the structural factors. But if you're in your childhood, your environment, the structure is in a different way. Do you have a stable relationship, or do you have peers? Do you have good friends? Do you have a certain education? Then you're maybe more resilient to stress, and the stress often causes mental health issues. For example, that. So, yeah, I have the feeling everything is connected. Yeah.
So yeah, that's basically the whole point, I guess, of this. Yeah, but okay, let's do it anyways. I wrote my text. So I chose psychiatry and gender because apart from other diagnoses, I'm also a feminist. That's a new joke. I didn't have it written, okay? So if you look at psychiatry through the lens of gender, what you will see basically is the good old saying, sad girls be sad. This March, I had written a series of texts on women and psychiatry for my newsletter. And they are, of course, now out at Gyvenimas per brangus. And you can all read them. So I will draw on those articles a little bit here. And I just want to point out that when I say women, I generally do mean it inclusively of mostly feminine presenting people of all genders. So first of all, as per numbers of the year 2021, women in Lithuania are far more mentally ill, in quotes, than men. We have almost 213,000 diagnosed women and 114,500 of diagnosed men, so twice as many women. And of course, we have to keep in mind that here we are talking about the officially diagnosed people, so it does not paint the full picture, but I think it can, it still gives us some perspective. That aside, does it mean that women are just more mental, in quotes, than men? I do not think so, but although it should be noted that experiences of sexism and or racism, queerphobia and other isms like ableism that we talk today, right, they do definitely take a toll on one's mental health, but that is, I think, a topic for another time or for the evening discussions at the bar. So the thing is that the normality has been so masculinized for centuries that it permeates our whole culture, from the internal biases of the doctors making the diagnoses to the misogynistic hate spewed by the man babies on the internet. What I mean is that the normal person in our understanding is so much more closer to the typical male figure, whatever that means, than a typical female one. Let's just take some most common symptoms of mental health disorders in general. Doesn't matter the label. You would see the likes of impulsivity, mood swings, excessive crying, being unstable, etc., etc. And this is precisely what patriarchy made women to look like, right? On the contrary, being stable, withholding of emotions, presenting more stoic, more rational, is associated with being a man and, by extension, a normal, healthy person. This in itself is super problematic, but we do have more trouble in the numbers as well. I thought it was important to look at the numbers concerning specific diagnoses and types of diagnoses in relation to gender. There are more men diagnosed with, okay, let's guess, with what? What would you think are the main diagnoses for men? Suicide, well, it's not a diagnosis, it's a sad fact. What about the labels? What do you think? Autism, yeah. I will not talk about that because it's very problematic, actually, and I would prefer other people that have maybe like experience with working. ADHD, yeah. Schizophrenia, actually not. Yeah, if you look at the numbers, in Lithuania, there are as many schizophrenics, male schizophrenics, as many as female ones. Bipolar, no. No, exactly. Substance abuse, yeah. We have intellectual disabilities and learning difficulties such as dyslexia and, yes, autism, like you mentioned, but that is super complicated. I will not go into that. Without any intention to minimize these issues or to be insensitive,
Also,
I would...
antisocial disorder.
Yeah, from the personality disorder ones, yeah, the antisocial, yeah, because...
Which is related then to criminal...
Yeah, because men be unemotional, like girls be sad, right? So I would argue that these the ones I mentioned, like the substance abuses, the intellectual disabilities, the learning disabilities, they are kind of more concrete evidence-based diagnoses, I would say, bear with me please, than what women are diagnosed with, because there are significantly more women in diagnoses like anxiety disorders, mood disorders like depression and bipolar, also post-traumatic amnesia, OCD, and yes, my favorite, personality disorders in general, of course, excluding the antisocial one. So these, I would argue, are the things that more easily lend themselves to overdiagnosing and misdiagnosing. Let's take BPD, for example. When does too emotional become too emotional? When does too anxious become too anxious? BPD, in my opinion, is such a vague and such a feminized label that it becomes a new age hysteria of sorts. Almost all women could be diagnosed with BPD because it is so incredibly linked simply to what society expects women to be. Again, instability, moods changing very often, yada yada, and also to what girls are socialized like as well. It became painfully obvious to me in the psychiatry hospital. Out of all the patients in our unit, only one was a man, and it was a mixed gender unit. I feel I should be quoting something. So here is Phyllis Chesler book, Women and Madness. It is a classic in the field, first published in 1972, and at first I was reluctant to quote it, and I thought that maybe I shall search for something more contemporary, but then I decided it was interesting to see precisely how little has changed. So here the author talks about the perception of patients with schizophrenia according to their gender. I quote, Dr. Cheek refers to an earlier study done by Letaillot, it's a French name, I have no idea how to pronounce it, in which he suggests that the overactive dominating female and the underactive passive male are cultural anomalies and are therefore hospitalized. The passive female schizophrenic is probably not hospitalized at so early an age any more than is the active male schizophrenic, because we think of active as male, passive as female, right? Letaillot thinks that the role reversal is a function of the disease process. I think that what Cheek calls the role reversal or rejection is what is labeled crazy or is partly what the disease is about. End of quote. That's 1972. Another quote in the same book, when shown a picture of a bull in a bull ring, female schizophrenics evidenced more normal male reaction. They said that they would kill the bull. And male schizophrenics reacted as normal women. They said that they would flee the bull ring. So basically, gender has been linked to psychiatry from times immemorial. And these things put me personally in a very interesting and challenging place. I started as a person trying to raise awareness about the symptoms of BPD, or borderline personality disorder, about the way the mega emotional and mega sensitive brains like mine work. And generally, I wanted to spread more awareness about emotional conditions beyond depression and anxiety, which are talked about the most, arguably. I set out to offer people hope and practical advice as where to get help if you identify with the way I experience the world, and I think I did that a little bit. What daily practices could you be using, etc. So I was doing what Molly Adler from Back from the Borderline podcast calls BPD 123. And here is my shout out to Molly. If anybody is listening to her, she's a diva, I love her. Soon enough, I realized that I was also, apart from that, interested in dismantling the psychiatric system as a whole. Quite a job for one little girl, right? I realized I'm not interested in labels at all anymore, and I wanted to talk about what unites us as humans rather than what divides us. So what do? How do I simultaneously raise awareness on BPD, which is still what I would like to be doing, and at the same time dismantle the whole BPD discourse, because in the end we are all human beings. It was and still is a personal concern and challenge for me that I deal with on the daily. At first, I even denied myself the joy of sharing sad, mad BPD girl memes because I do not want to uphold the stigmatizing discourse. But the memes are fun, right? And it's fun to share them with other sad, mad BPD girlies and laugh at the whole system while doing so. This is where the concept of dialectics, which I took from dialectical behavior therapy, helps me. Two seemingly opposing things can be true at the same time, because that is exactly how life in general is. So now I happily share the memes and then offer a series of articles that completely take the piss out of the system of psychiatry. So I chose to exist on a borderline, if you will. That is not an easy position, actually, and I think that it is directly caused by the gendering of craziness, which ultimately fails us all. Because yes, I do talk a lot about how women are impacted by this, that certain mental labels are feminized, but also on the other hand, we have men that are not socially encouraged to get help at all. Or then again, alcohol consumption, is that a normal behavior for a man, stuff like that. So I think that it is a double-edged sword. And whenever we talk about psychiatry, we have to remember its history, which was particularly cruel to women and queer people. And we have to even use the labels very, very cautiously. Yeah, because if we are calling somebody hysterical, what do we mean? If we look back and think about what hysteria was, it was being a woman, basically, right? You are either too sexually active or you are not sexually active enough, and either way you are hysterical. So in my work, I really do like to keep that in mind, and I think that the gender question is, again, much more complex than I talked about here, so I would like to get your questions and comments as well, but I think that is one of the most important aspects that we have to be looking at, because it's not innocent. The psychiatry system is not innocent by any means, and especially in this particular topic. Yeah, so that was what I've written, and then, yeah, maybe I'll get some comments.
Thank you. Very important insights. I just wanted to add something from what you said, because I think it's huge. I was thinking about general assumptions a lot about what mental health system and is based on, and I was also looking into main criteria for mental health disorders. It's always two aspects that are important. That in order something to be a disorder, it's like social dysfunction and distress or suffering, apart from the other symptoms. But it has to. These are two essential factors for something to be a pathology officially, or to be considered as a mental health disorder. And this is also very clearly not fixed or objective, in the sense that what it means to function and in what context, and I think in some definitions being mentally healthy is related to being wait, I have written somewhere down, being mentally healthy means that individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. That's the definition by WHO. So that's also very relative to certain cultural agreements. And many cultural agreements or consensus is also based on certain androcentric assumptions what a person should be like, and I think this being socially functional is related to not being too sensitive, right? Or not, and being able to function and control yourself all the time and be productive. So that's also very related to what you said. So I just wanted to
And
add-
what I also find fascinating, if you read I read the Lithuanian version of the DSM, and I always find funny things in it. So apart from all the other horrors, like there's a disorder if you were taken into a concentration camp and now you are kind of not very happy. That's a disorder. But my newest favorite is it says like that literally, some unclassified psychiatric disorder, some other type of unclassified psychiatric disorder. So what could it be? You drink too much
Anything.
tea, you weirdo.
well, as long as
That
it's,
is fascinating and also scary.
as long as it's distressing and not functional, can be a disorder, I guess.
Yeah, I think we are going to talk about that later because, distresses are, and again, what Ian talked about, distresses are also often caused by the environment we live in. And also, like what you said, we're living in a planet that's boiling, that's kind of sad as well.
Oh, just one more thing that I remembered, sorry, about, and also being able to act autonomously, right, and independently of others. That's also usually prescribed as a criteria of healthy personality, because if there is abnormal personality, there should be a normal personality, which is also related to assumptions that you mentioned that are permeated by certain patriarchal ideas about what a human is, and human is someone who is not too attached and always independent.
And that also relates to what one of you said. Self-care is a buzzword that we hear a lot. And one of my most favorite quotes, I don't really know the author, but it's in all the memes also. So it says, shouting self-care at people who actually need community care is how we fail them. So yeah, that also speaks to that.
Yeah, I would come back to that later. I think we also going to talk about a little bit more about political movements and in this area. But yeah, when we talk about the being able to control ourselves and being like an individual, how do you say it in English? Individual. Yeah, you see. Oh my gosh,
English is hard.
I got stuck up in listening to you. It was quite interesting. The one thing I want also to add is, like, for you who are not maybe in the psychological research, everything is in a binary system. Like, still we fight for research which is not in the binary system. So I'm very sorry that we can also almost only speak in like this binaries. Sorry for that. But yeah, this is, I mean, who then could be healthy in our world? I mean, we are all under performance pressure. We are all in our norms, in our like gender roles or other societal roles. So yeah, then it's the question, who could even be healthy? Yeah.
Yeah, I often say that, in my opinion, that normality is a myth kind of created by psychiatry as well, apart from like other things, like who is that normal person that we are always comparing ourselves with? If you know them, please let me know. I would like to, talk to them.
I think it's kind of a homo economicus. I don't know if you have like this term in English, but like a rational person who always has the answers to everything, and that is kind of not normal. It's kind of a robot. But I would also be very interested how you feel it as a person who is in the sector of a therapist more, or in the educational sector.
Well, you mentioned so many points, so I feel everything about everything. Yes. I think maybe, why don't I just do my own deep dive, the family bit that I was just planning. So I was thinking about what aspect in my work on a society level, flies really impact me big time. But I was thinking about my work, and I realized that, like, I work with children and adolescents. Actually, sometimes I work with adults as well. But the people I work with, I see them in the context of a family. And the last degree I did is child, adolescent, and family therapy. And although I'm not a family therapist, that family bit is essential. I see every person in the context of their family. And then I was thinking that I don't know if family has sort of a home on the political spectrum, if you like. So the right wing is playing this poker hand with a bit of a bluff of pretending to care about the family and families, but really it's more of a twist of wanting to make families and shape them into something to make it a certain kind of building block of this, that would maybe serve the idea of nation that somebody else has, and stuff like that. And then I think that the left is somehow a bit cautious about the family. I mean, from where I stand, I don't get to see many leftists writing or talking or showing a lot of interest in family. So in my work, family is crucial. When families are more sort of depleted, when there's less resources in families, the more work I have, and the more complicated that work is. And the other way around, if the families are doing well, then there's less work from you, or no less, or no work at all. And I want to talk a little bit about those resources within those families. So I worked in 3 settings before I left London just a couple of weeks ago. I worked in 2 schools, and I worked in a private practice. But 3 or 4 days a week I was working in one of the public schools, and a very common and kind of repetitive problem that I would see in the children I worked with and in their families is that there's just lack of proper housing, actually. So 5-6 people families live in 1 or 2 bedroom flats, and they're all crowded, and they don't have enough private space and all that. And then there are other social needs and psychological needs that the families might have. There's something about children growing up in the presence of adults who are constantly in the stress response. So, distressed families basically consist of adults who are in this sort of fighting mode or flight mode or freeze mode, and as a result, the child, when they come back home, there is no simple healthy interaction of having banter together, just having a laugh together, or just sitting down and looking through the window and just looking at the birds together and sharing that sort of attention there. Children lack presence of adults who are ready to see them and be in tune with them. And that this one actually kind of goes across the class structure. I see that in the working class. I see that also in the richer families that I work with. It feels like a simple thing, but actually it's not. There are so many ways of seeing therapy, but one of the ways to see therapy is that you have 2 people in the room, and one person is one nervous system, and that nervous system is sort of overloading. It's not regulated, and then the other nervous system is the therapist, and the task of the therapist is just to be more regulated, and in the presence of the dysregulated person to be able to remain calmer and contained, and so the kind of visual image that I can give, if you imagine the mentally struggling person as a person of being in a ditch, basically in a hole, and the role of the therapist, but also the parent, is to sort of have one leg outside the ditch and one leg inside the ditch. So you're sort of like, you have the empathy, you can see the child for who they are and the problems that they have, and you're in tune with them and you see them. But at the same time, your other leg is outside, so you're seeing the bigger picture, you're seeing the resources, and you're more regulated than the person who's in the ditch, and you're helping them to come out of there. And that's just lacking in the families a lot of the times. And then there are all kinds of social needs that we've been struggling with in schools for the past few years, since the lockdown especially. So it's the constant reality of you work with the child, and then you have the school system being completely stretched. So for example, the SENCO, the person who does assessments of the needs of the person, has a waiting list that is huge, and they just can't, they don't have enough hours in their day. Then you have the teacher that they're overloaded. Then you have the safeguarding people that are overloaded. Then you have the social services, and they're in the families that struggle, you have the social worker. But the social worker is overwhelmed with paperwork, with having an enormous caseload. So everything is stretched to the complete maximum. And there's just lack of that kind of support on the nation level, I would say. There's a lack of day centers, there's a lack of youth centers, where, the stresses and where can be sort of shared, and spaces where young people could go to when their families are struggling too much. So really, these are, I think, very regular kind of leftist subjects we've been talking about for decades, but they are a problem even more today than they used to be.
Thank you, Paulius. I would like to have some follow-up questions on that, if it's okay, because your topic now is like, you're talking about different resources that families have, right? Different psychosocial and economic resources that are related then to the child's well-being, right? I know that adverse childhood experiences as a term is very important in child and adolescent mental health, and it's also like a construct that was very useful for understanding trauma and its consequences, right? An accumulation of trauma in different ways. So could you say a few words with that, and how adverse childhood experiences are related to other social political aspects? If you could say something around
so
that.
One example came to my mind. So this is not my personal experience, but the experience of other therapists I heard of. So we had this tragedy in the UK, a massive fire of the Grenfell Tower. It's a big, huge council estate that kind of burned down, and a lot of people died. And as a result, there were therapists working with the children who were the survivors, and the children who saw other people dying, and perhaps they saw their family members dying, and so in regards to the accumulation of trauma and the layers of trauma, what the therapist noticed is that if you have a child who just had that fire as their traumatic experience, but other than that their life was pretty much okay up to that point, then they can go and sort of facilitate. I think it was the EMDR therapy, and they could do that, and they could actually get good, results from it. But then they noticed that with some children that just doesn't work, and the reason was that because they had an earlier trauma from their earlier life, so that fire was just another second big trauma layer on top. So they actually had to come back and work on the very early trauma before they could work with the recent trauma. And so trauma goes in layers, trauma goes throughout generations, So, for example, one of the ways I experience anxiety myself is that I have a sort of connection between anxiety and digestion problems. And now that's interesting because a lot of people have that, right? I see reactions around. But the interesting thing is that that goes throughout my family at least 4 generations up. And until I can, have no way of knowing whether, how far back it actually goes. But one of my parents has it, one of my grandmother has it, and then my great grandfather, and I know it from conversations and letters and so on, and so in every family have trauma going sort of from one generation to another. It's sort of passed on, it's sort of inherited, like it's almost a tangible object sometimes. So when we work with families, we sometimes do what's called a genogram, and that's a bit like a family tree, but on that thing that looks like a family tree, you also have different sort of symptoms marked and different relationships between families, and you just see how that certain mental health problems and physical problems just travel from one generation to another, and yeah.
Thanks. I just wanted to add that thinking about like the current environment in which the person is in, which is also very important, as you said, being in a distressed environment or growing up with distressed parents, and there are many reasons why they can be distressed. It's a risk factor, and it's something that which removes potential social resource from you, right? And I just was researching a little bit on topic of adverse childhood experiences because I was interested if it's related to socioeconomic status, and for sure it is. And that's why I re-asked, because it's strongly related with socioeconomic status, so, for example, poverty could be considered as adverse childhood experience, and also when people are in financial stress or marginalized, they are also, they find it's difficult to self-regulate. They can be more, can treat others in not such a nice manner when they're stressed. So there can be more social problems or conflicts and all of that. I think that's why it's adverse childhood experiences are still, everything, actually all mental disorders are distributed by the gradient of socioeconomic status. So even having generational trauma, if we have safe environment in which one grows up and has resources here and now, then one can recover. And if one is in a distressing environment, then this generational trauma probably gets worse. And forced migration is also very clear and strong factor on that, and children that have experienced that, of course, have very strong consequences.
Yeah, there's an interesting research with rats, and humans are almost like rats, but so what they did is they taught a rat to be afraid of the cherry blossom. So the rat smells cherry and they're afraid because they were given shock. And now they made, those rats had children, but the children were separated from the rats, and the children of the rats had children and they were separated. So there's no sort of social connection between them. But the result is that the grandchildren of the rats were afraid of the cherry blossom smell, and so trauma travels even through, in this case, epigenetics. So you don't have to even have that socialization aspect there. So it's pretty complicated.
For sure, thank you. Would you like to continue, Marivi? Or maybe respond to something and then...
No, I think I kind of feel that I would rather talk about the going on with the political movement on, I don't know if you have because I feel like what I said about everything is connected between mental health and political factors. For me, that's a lot of it. Like I could now talk about housing. I could talk about time wealth. I already talked about that. But yeah, I would just keep on.
Okay, then we go to next question so that we have time to talk together. We should then hurry up. I think I just realized. Sorry. So the second part of this, second aspect, which follows from how we think about mental health. If we think about mental health as also societal, then the solution should be also societal. Doesn't mean that individual solutions are not important, but there should be also societal responses to that. So the question is, how can we politically mobilize on the issue of mental health? So just sharing some thoughts, and I'm already adding the second question, which is related. What are the common goals and political demands so that we could live in a world where people feel better? So basically, the political mobilization and demands that could be communicated when mobilizing. So, question to all of you.
Yeah, maybe I will just start. And I try to keep it short so we have still some time for your questions. Many people, as you said, start also in the social media, talk about mental health, and you have this content, this reel about are you depressed or whatsoever, and everybody kind of got a psychologist. And I think it's also good to construct it and let people share their experience, but and it's also it's also the decreasing stigma, which is also good in a way. But what I see very problematic is this trend of, I mean, maybe you have heard of those vanilla girls, so it's like those people, or it's kind of almost girls who like do a lot of self-care and be like super healthy, do a lot of meditation and yoga and being like, really try and go to therapy and be like super open about it, which is nice in a way. Of course, it's important to be open about that, but it's so highly on the individual level, and it's kind of then made like it's kind of corrupted by a capitalistic logic, because everything gets like a competition, like who's the best and taking care of him, her, itself, and who is having the next good yoga retreat and pays 500 euros for it whatsoever. So I see this as very problematic, because people are made responsible to change, to be mental healthy, and to ready to work, to do labor, and they're made responsible to change an environment they cannot all of it change by themselves. And it's very easy then for like political leaders, people in power, to just tell the people, well, maybe you should just like do some more meditation. Maybe you just like, what about that? Then you come back to work. That's kind of problematic.
At work, you can do meditation and then get back.
Yeah, I mean, there's all of this in the organizational psychology. They have a lot of those things, and of course, it's nice at least to be finer. But that's so easy then to give the responsibility to the people, to the workers, and not to restructure, for example, the health system or the educational system, and to allow people to work less, for example. That is also not talked about then. So, for example, in Germany, one of the main factors of illness is that people, work so much, they get so stressed out. And also nobody is talking about prevention. Like, this system makes people sick. So, in Germany, I think only 4.5% go in the expenses in the health sector go to prevention in Germany, and this is so little. So I think that's very problematic. And as a common goal and demand, maybe I would just go on to say that, yeah, we should like make people and keep people sustainable, healthy, and so we change structures. We need, for example, collective care structures. We need funding in every social area, and material conditions like free houses, free housing. I mean, I'm not a political scientist, but it's like with all the people I spoke in the podcast about who were like psychological researchers said, yeah, it makes people mentally healthier if we have those structures. And that's what you're all also fighting for, which is great. And maybe the other thing I also just want to make aware of is that we all who want to change the structures have internalized capitalism itself, which I often see with this activist burnout, for example. So who is doing the most gets the highest appreciation. And I mean, that's the dilemma. We have to change stuff, but I think we should more start to listen to people who can't participate in this pressuring system. And that's for me, I think it's so awesome that we talk about here. Also, I had this panel about the disability movement and stuff like that. So we should listen more to those people, and we should listen to people from disability movement, disability justice movement, and to make them also shape the structures, because there are experts out there who already have the knowledge. Yeah, that's what I want to say.
Thanks. So prevention. Yeah, mentioned prevention. So working conditions, less work, better healthcare and other social services, and empowering the most vulnerable and affected. Yeah. And
empowering. I think empowering is always kind of like a difficult word.
Listening to them.
Yeah, listening to them and make them become active. Yeah.
What are your ideas about mobilizing around mental health? We have 5 minutes and then we open the discussion with everyone. So just last points. The mobilization on mental health or concrete demands, maybe?
When it comes to therapists, counselors, psychologists, I'm a little bit cautious to talk about sort of big goals. I think that these side professionals should just first of all find a way of coming together and maybe having a beer, maybe something else. Just coming together. Like really, it's
ultimate individualists.
If you
psychologists.
Well,
How is that different from social?
Social prescribing.
I'm not aware of the term social prescribing, actually. Shame on me.
We'll discuss this later in the open
yes.
discussion.
Yes, I think if you aim too high, it gets too overwhelming in some way. But so therapists, counselors, psychologists were so used to be focused on others, but we really neglect our own needs a lot of the time. So there's so much burnout, underpay, and not good enough conditions. I don't know, if you work as a school psychologist in Lithuania, for example, you get such difficult cases, and do you have enough support? Do you have the right supervision for it? And loads of stuff. But other than that, just refinancing and putting back the resources in schools so that there are enough teaching assistants, that the social workers they have proper balance between their paperwork and their caseload. There are youth centers and stuff like that. And I don't know, in the past few years, I sometimes refer families to some other sort of external support outside school because, well, maybe the summer is coming, or maybe the child is not attending the school, just refuses to attend. So maybe there's an external service that they can attend to. But in the past few years, so many of the services closed actually because they don't have enough finance. So putting finance back into all these other support networks around mental health services. And yeah.
So, in other words, social services and social support as a protective factor, a preventive factor, right?
Yeah, and serve with a long-term vision as well. Yeah, yeah.
Elena?
Yeah, these are big goals and they are nice. I agree with them totally. But, you know, coming from a perspective of, you know, I'm not a mental health professional, neither I'm in politics nor in decision making. I would say that we do not need to underestimate the very everyday small little anarchist practices. Like, just stop trusting what the system is telling you. And I think it comes naturally for a lot of us here, but there are many people around us and we can just sneakily spread this agenda to just stop believing what is being told to us about us, you know? The way I do it is like my readers, they text me, what do I do if I'm too clingy in my relationship? And I'm like, girl, who said that? Like, too clingy compared to what? Do you authentically feel that way? Is that actually a problem in your life? Or did just somebody told you that you are behaving in a way that is basically pathology, like next step is pathology? And some of them are like, yeah, I know all of that, but still it's a problem. I'm too clingy. Okay, we can talk about that. But a lot of them are like, yeah, okay, right. When I think about it, I think we have to spread this mistrust, you know, of the official narrative. That is very important and very horizontal. So more sneaky bitches is what I'm saying. Yeah, you know, we need more of those. Yeah, and it works. Like you can like talk to one person, and I know I'm naive, people tell me that, but you can talk to one person and you can actually make a difference. Just ask them questions. I think question asking is such a good activity. So let's do that. Let's do that now, I guess, right?
Yeah. So we're gonna open discussion now. Okay. What I want to add from my side on what psychologists or people who care about mental health should mobilize around when talking about mental health is also like obviously inequality, and there's a very famous study by Wilson and Pickett who showed how mental health prevalence is associated with inequalities within societies, and that they explain that by status anxiety and social stress and social problems that then contribute to mental problems. So I really hope that mental health aspect would be integrated to other policies and other demands than just having a separate bubble or separate kind of location for in our heads when talking about mental health. Because if we talk about mental health as part of our living experienced reality and our lived reality, then we see that they're related, and inequality and communities as protective factors, as social support, as I think one of the strongest protective factors against mental illnesses. I think really need to capitalize on that from my side.
Maybe just adding that I think this is very wonderful. Like, I also don't think we need like a special movement for mental health. We should all in our movements talk more about mental health. Like, we just, but not just on the you're responsible for this and that, but on how can we work with this now? Yeah.
Collectively. So the floor is ours now. Who would like to ask or add or comment? Anya? I think maybe better in the middle, okay? Thank you. Yeah. Just sit down in the middle.
I also wrote down something because you're not alone and people are nervous too who want to ask questions or add comments.
Thanks God I said that.
So thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, I would just add like a small comment on like this whole different like thinking of psychology on different dimensions. For example, like the generational lens, then like the neurological lens, the political lens, and everything. And I really relate to your statement with like coming together also from like different disciplines, because for me like they don't actually cancel each other out. For example, the generational lens and the political lens. I mean, a lot of us, for example, come from families with like some post-Soviet or Soviet background or something. So there is definitely like a political moment there, and like political moment of either occupation or you were the occupant or anything, but like there are like still generational stuff that goes back to political situations that your grandparents have been in, for example. So like I feel like they don't cancel each other out, but like they can like work together very, very well. And same goes like, or for example, also with those also like Holocaust studies or like Holocaust generational trauma. So it's like a highly politicized subject, and yet like also a very like highly psychological subject. So and the other thing is like also for me like a neurological and a political lens don't really cancel each other out, but one rather has to see like what kind of neurological states are punished and how do you say it?
Punished and rewarded?
Yeah, punished and rewarded by society, basically. So take ADHD, for example. High dopamine level is rewarded by society. You're more social. You're like likely to be liked. Low dopamine level, people don't understand where you are in your head. So like it's not really, it's rather punished than rewarded. So like for me also like this taking, maybe because it's also a personal issue, but like taking the medicine also doesn't really interfere with like some political point where you actually question what kind of circumstances make you like shape the negative identity around certain neurological things, for example. So yeah, I think a lot of psychology disciplines can actually come together very well. And thank you for this talk.
Anyone wants to comment?
No, I'm just going to promote another internet person now. If you have Instagram, Vogue Scientist, please follow her. She's amazing. She's an anarchist. She comes from the decolonialization viewpoint, and she writes a lot about mental health, and like you said, like these do not cancel each other out. And recently I read her piece. It was wonderful, on medicine and drugs like street drugs and also prescription drugs and their hierarchy, we could say, according to if they help you become more productive or do they prevent you from being a productive worker in a society. So basically, if you have, please excuse me my language, legal speed for ADHD, right? And it increases your productivity. So this puts that medication at the top, right? And then good old booze. It makes you sleepy, right? You cannot work. So that is like frowned upon more. So of course there are many factors contributing to what drugs are seen like, better or worse, but this is one of them, and that was new for me, productivity issue. Yeah, so that's also what you said, what's rewarded and what's punished.
Hi again. So I want to bring back to the local context, I guess, again. That's my role today. And you mentioned the role of family, and that's under-discussed. And I just wanted maybe a comment about the general moods when it's talked about child and teenager mental health in Lithuania, when, so to say, to use my French, shit goes down. The family is to blame. Like, the family didn't do what they're supposed to do. But we like, what's your reply to that? Yeah.
I'm slightly out of tune with the Lithuanian context because I haven't worked here for almost a decade. But it's complicated for a professional to navigate that thing. So if you work with a child, you get really sort of kind of identified and in tune with their needs, and you then very likely might feel anger on behalf of them towards whoever failed them. And it's easy to feel anger towards parents, actually, as a professional like me. And then you have to do your own work, so you don't approach parents from that position of anger, but you find empathy and you find cooperation there. And
I meant more like in the public sphere, like when it's discussed openly, like some cases that really draw public attention, and in my personal work, I feel like I just see so much, frustration because that there's a lot of pressure put on people to kind of like, there's a lot of individual responsibility for your own mental health, and you know, maybe then to also kind of lead it to the answer is that I feel like people are really forced to actually get support from the structures that they come from, which we're not able to actually support them with their development, you know. So I don't know, like, could you tell a bit about...
It feels like you're more knowledgeable about this question than I am, and it's sort of, you know, you're giving an answer.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, what would be your maybe argument to reply to, you know, this mass reaction? Because in, I don't know, like, maybe, so you have experience in the UK, right? But maybe then you are a bit familiar with the differences of structural. You mentioned the you know, necessity and importance of the social services, and you know, there's probably a difference between UK and Lithuania, and you know, so could you maybe comment on, you know, how it affects, you know, the family and the individual mental health care?
I mean, it's quite hard for me to compare, but I can empathize with families where, like, I think if you have a child and if that child is struggling, the amount of guilt and shame you would feel as a parent is immense. And then if you have to seek some sort of support and you're in the radar of other professionals, I mean, I think that's really, really hard. So, I mean, I've seen both positive and negative examples, but overall, I can say that in the schools that I worked in, you know, families were approached by and large with that understanding and with that empathy and with the idea of offering support rather than shaming or anything like that.
I just want to comment on what you said very quickly. I just think that we need to think of families as part of their certain milieus and communities, and we also should think about how families are failed by their communities. Not only that children are failed by their families, but families are failed by their communities to support them. So I think that's a very important aspect.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's a really nice focus point. It's like a mental health, and I assume that a lot of us here probably would agree that the ultimate horizon for questions of mental health is abolishing capitalism. But because we talked about this, and like a lot of problems boil down to economic aspects, etc. But while we are stuck in this like pre-revolutionary stage, it's yeah, I find it personally quite frustrating that the tools that we have, they are very limited. And from my personal experience and from like my life and from people I know, actually the kind of normal tools which we have, that is like psychotherapy and then medication, etc. I find that when done well, they can be extremely useful and very, very valuable. But it is also really a shame for me because, well, of course, psychotherapy is very expensive, not accessible to everyone. So I was thinking for myself, and I wanted to ask also what you think about it. Like, I imagine one part of what can be done is, of course, a political movement. But on the other hand, yeah, I was thinking about autonomous structures. Like, we have something which is accessible, that is medicine, and for some people, therapy, which is sometimes great, sometimes not. On the other hand, it would be so good to have something parallel to it, something autonomous, which could work for us, like for us, the people or people on the left or whatever. And yes, on the keynote talk, some things were mentioned, like the red clinics, etc. Right? But yeah, I wonder what you think about that and about these possibilities. Right?
What, I think the question was headed to you, or we will no? Okay. Like, I kind of, what comes first to my mind is that I think of education. So, like, to know more about, to learn more about it, to speak more about it. First, to be then able to, to know what to do in your community. And that's what I think is also like this balance between deconstruction and not letting only the experts talk, because what I can say is like I have all my knowings from university is from this weird what we talked about, the Western educational industrialized knowledge. And I think that is not exactly what is needed, and what is needed for everybody. So for me, one point, which is not like everything and the solution for everything, but would be also to be open to find with education and stuff like that more solutions, and not just to to take everything that is from the psychologist's perspective for like serious, and that's what the best for me is. Yeah.
I was just thinking to myself that I kind of also want to acknowledge that we just need also time as a humanity. Because there was so much sort of critical sentiment which I relate to in this discussion in the previous talk, but I think if you look back at how things were 50, 70 years ago, by and large, most things are better now. So also maybe, I don't know, not overly kind of whipping ourselves here just of how bad things are, but just kind of calmly moving forward. I think we are slowly moving forward.
Just a comment to that. In the last 20 years, the antidepressant consumption has more than doubled in OECD countries, but the depression rates hasn't. So that's just, I don't know if it's really improving in this sense. Just short contra argument, sorry.
Thank you.
And what I wanted to react to what you said, I'm sorry, because I just want also to react, because you talked about autonomous spaces. I think it's so important. I cannot overemphasize, also from research, but also from my own experience, the importance of social support as a protective factor, as a resource, as a healing factor. Like, we cannot heal. I mean, we cannot. I think we should think about recovery and also accommodating people in distress instead of isolating them. If I'm distressed, I have to withdraw. No, we have to make spaces, social, safe spaces, like Parker talked about asylums, some sort of asylum, safe asylums where people can be accommodated in their distress, in with their communities, with their people, with supporting and nourishing connections instead of being isolated when you're feeling low. I think we have to find ways to do that.
I would like to say, let's garden together.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what I found, like, for me, was immensely helpful. And now I have my newsletter, which is called Elena's Garden of Emotions. And garden really does come from gardening. I have a tomato tattoo. Hello. So the thing is that we have to, I think we would have to redefine what therapy even is, or what a healing practice can look like stargazing. You know, but it is. I mean, it's accumulating joy is a very good thing to practice, I think, as a prevention to the sad world we live in.
I'm actually planning to make a collective garden inspired by you, actually.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, gardening is I recently, one reader of mine sent me some article which explained that not only it's a psychological benefit that you get from gardening, but that actually in the soil there is some kind of chemical which I really do not remember, but it acts as an antidepressant when yeah, everything is everything all at once, like it was said, but the thing is, that was fascinating to me. It's not only a nice thing to do, but apparently, yeah, it's proven, it's science.
Yeah, thank you all very much for your insights and your perspectives. I wanted to add one comment and one question. I wanted to add like one comment and one question. The comment refers to what you said about psychiatry being very guilty in the past, especially in Germany. It horrifies me that it's so little known to the public how much psychiatry has been complicit in horrifying enterprises in comparison to how widely it is used, and like what is publicly known about psychotic drugs, for instance. And my question refers to mobilizing around mental health, because obviously, like most of us, it frustrates me a lot on how efficiently mental health is like mobilized around and promoted online, for instance, which is a huge tool right now, but in a very individualistic way in comparison to how many people are politicized actually and are organized in political organizations. At least in Germany, it's crazy how different like those forces are. So I was wondering, how is your experience around publicly speaking about dismantling the psychiatric system, for instance, how much this resonates with the people you're connecting via the internet?
You know, there was one young person now that reached out to me. She's around 20, I would say. I'm as old as 32 myself. And she just recently started sharing online about her experiences in the psychiatric hospital, first of all, and then, you know, around the whole process that we go through, like medication, they don't work, you have a diagnosis, it doesn't work. And she was like, could you give me some advice? And I really thought about it, and I was like, you do have to consider what do you want to do in life. As young as you are, you really do have to think if you want a career someday, if you want to have a powerful position somewhere. And my advice would be, then do not speak about it. It's sad, but it's true, you know. I've decided for myself that I do not want a career. I want to sit in my effing garden all day long and not do anything else, aside from an occasional text or two. But that is actually, yeah, you have to think about those things, because when you out yourself as a poster child of BPD, like in my case, yeah, I do not read comments on Gyvenimas per brangus. I would never do that. Once I publish a text, I very consciously set that setting that do not notify me of anything related to this article. I have a very nice community of readers, and they are super kind to me, so I choose to say in that. But yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of pressure, and yeah, you have to think for yourself. You know, can you afford? Basically, what I mean is, can you afford becoming a mental health activist?
And sorry, in addition to that, how do you feel people react to you saying, okay, we need to dismantle the system and we need to politically mobilize instead of maybe focusing on just caring for ourselves?
I don't know, maybe the people, you know, the people that like-minded people find like-minded people. I do not have a problem with that in my circle at all. People are generally like, yeah, yeah, we have to do that. But yeah, I wanted to say something else, but now I forgot because of how mentally ill I am. So if I remember it, I'm going to make a comment, yeah, later. But yeah, it's yeah, being public, yeah, it's kind of a job on its own, I would say.
Well, we have time for 2 more questions. So your question, and who else? Somebody else? Okay.
Okay. I'll try to be as short as possible. And I want to share a piece of experience actually from the field. So I'm coordinator of a subdivision of a labor union, which is called Association of Ukrainians in Neringa. And the association was formed after last summer, which was super harsh for all the Ukrainians who moved to Neringa. And then we faced a lot of exploitation and exhausted people after this seasonal works in hotels and restaurants. And then we spoke throughout the whole autumn, winter, spring, we formed a core of women of this association, and it was let's talk about these issues, and let's prevent this exhaustion next summer. And then Yeah, so my comment is addressed to this like lack of time issue and vicious circle of not having resource for the therapy or whatever. So the result is that one of the core members of our association got employed in the hotel, then was like absolutely, totally mentally, physically exhausted. And I met her like after many weeks of like her being disappeared, and I asked, "What? How are you?" And like she told all the classical situations that we were discussing throughout the year, that she doesn't have any breaks, like she cannot like get payment for extra hours, really classical. And I'm like, but Gulnara, you know, and like that, and etc. And she's like, yeah. And then I understood that she doesn't like she feels that she has to be comfortable. Like she was comfortable, she was a comfortable person in our community when we were discussing these problems, and she still wants to be comfortable at the workplace. So she's kind of wanting to change things, and she wants things to be better, but she cannot mentally cope with this another pressure of being just, you know, useful, functioning well, etc. So yeah, like activism is a hard work, but what is the activism? Like I'm activist, I'm talking to people. Without their will to change conditions for themselves, nothing will change, because like, if, you know, who am I to come and tell that you know, she feels uncomfortable if she doesn't complain? So then it's like, and you never go out eventually. Like, yeah, in these discussions, panels, we are super optimistic about gardening. When I hear about gardening, I'm like, because we have a garden and it's like a burden on me because I have to maintain it, like it's part of my duties, it's like, you know, fuck. But it was planned as a very, very supportive activity by the director, whoever, because there is something in soil, but eventually it's like dried grass and I'm like responsible for not maintaining it. It's like many solutions and collective discussions, they result in absolutely opposite things when we feel even more guilty for failing, you know, while trying. And yeah, so that's it. It's not formed as a question, it's like just bitter pain that I'm having. Yeah.
That's how self-help backfires, actually. Yes. Like you set it as a goal, and then, oh, I'm now feeling guilty for not doing that, on top of all the other stuff that I already had. So you have to be careful about it, you know, with self-help.
But this is activist thing, right? Like, yeah, so if it's not only about self-help, it's like about changes, like about political commitment and also optimism. Like if we start to do such things, we are optimistic, we're thinking, yeah, next summer will be better. And it is better, actually. For some people it is. So it's not like absolutely a desperate situation, but this exact moments, like when you see that, okay, so probably that exact person would need a therapy, like to set the boundaries, to make space for the being angry, for like really complain, to be like uncomfortable. But there is no space for therapy because there is no time and there is no, you know, resources, and etc. etc. So it's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing. It's what I also experience often, that like when you're out of the student bubble and then into the work or whatsoever, then people, yeah, they don't have the time for anything else. They just start to be producing for labor, for like money. I mean, and having the privilege to do activism and have the energy to do it. Yeah, it is, not everybody can do that. And I also really like to say that for me, activism is not only going on demonstrations and whatsoever. It's like so much more. We should have a wider understanding of activism, but I can completely understand, yeah, also this kind of what can we do about it? Like this person even wants to do something, and I don't have an answer for that. But yeah, me for myself, I just started to say I want to listen more to people who are already very affected and cannot work in this pressuring system. That's what I already said. Like that's what I want to do, to listen more to people. And we talked in the podcast, for example, that we want to talk more to people who, for example, are in disability movement, and have something called crib time, where they say, I don't, maybe somebody else in here in the audience can say it better than me, but that we don't have to, like the time has to arrange among our needs and not the other way around. Thanks for sharing.
Okay. I just wanted to say maybe you just need stronger labor union presence in the workplace, so that it's not individual claim to, breaks, but it's a collective claim, and then that would be easier. Just I'm just from what you told me, it feels like that woman feels too alone in too responsible to make the claim to having a break, for example, from work individually, but maybe there should be some more collective way to make that claim and to sort of institutionalize that.
Okay, then I need to tell that it's the labor union is not attached to any company. It's like it's not just on the not the union on the workplace. It's like everybody works in different places. It's not like we are in the institution. It's more like we're trying to fight for the rights of anybody working or unemployed as well. So it's a bit different. To your question, because we will have to.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, we're gonna talk about that later. So I just want to share a bit of my experience, and then a couple of questions will follow. But I just feel like it's on topic, not off topic. So I just had almost 3 terrible years of anxiety and depression, and the university where I was while having it, and the cause of it, was gave me counseling, gave me regular doctor's visits, medication. What else? I actually wrote, extensions to deadlines, deferrals, more medication, another medication, and so on and so forth. Then what I actually needed was, how I wrote that, more time within a more communal setting. Because this was in the UK, and I feel like studying in the UK is very individualized, and especially if you are in a very competitive institution, it gets very competitive and very this individualistic sort of being always only with yourself and with a book, and all the burden is on you, and you do not. There's such a thing as a community doesn't even exist. So I prescribed myself in addition to all the medication and psychotherapy and everything else, I prescribed myself becoming a part of the community there, because I was a foreigner immigrant as well, so I didn't have a lot of social support. And that actually helped me. So one of my questions is, what do you think about social prescribing? Yeah, so now I can explain what it is. So I prescribed myself, as I say, becoming a part of the community. But now, in the UK especially, I think it's even integrated in the universal healthcare system. But sometimes people get prescribed things like going to a community garden, or attending dance class, or things like, I don't know, like things like that. So I wanted to ask, what do you think about this kind of institutionalized prescribing of activities that probably should be just normal if you lived quality lives? Is that a way, or isn't it, and why? And did you understand what social prescribing is? Sort of, yeah. And another thing, so coming back to my little story, I realized that the issue is not that I don't have counseling and not exactly within me, only in me. But then I had a dilemma, like what should I do? And this is also probably a question about this political mobilization. So do we start making mental health related movements about things that are beyond this little segment of healthcare system, like trying to mobilize people that face certain mental health issues and distress and whatsoever, and try to mobilize them not only maybe around free therapy, for example, but also around, I don't know, having 4-day work week or things like that, but I don't know, more support for social centers or youth centers, or we do something like you mentioned. Sorry, I forgot your name. Like trying to bring in mental health in the other movements, and maybe even sort of, yeah. That's my 2 questions.
I kind of have to admit that I'm kind of out of. I already forgot your first question, so.
Social prescribing. I don't know how exactly works, but the way I imagine psychiatry in the ideal world is that the psychiatrist builds a picture of what's going on in the person's life, all aspects of it, medical, psychological, social, cultural, intergenerational, and whatnot, and then tries to come up with solutions and sort of doesn't prioritize medication, but maybe keeps it as a kind of more of a last resort if it's really, really needed and if other things don't help. So starting off with social activities and circles and so on, and I think it's a good idea. About prescribing it feels weird, sounds weird, but well, maybe if somebody prescribed me, for example, basketball, and because it costs money, then it's somebody would pay for it for me, and why not? I'll take that. So,
what I like to say, like Tadas commented, the pre-revolutionary state. So while we wait for the system to collapse, let's get everything we can out of the system. I mean, it does sound weird and sick, social prescribing, but yeah, if we can do that, come on, let's do it. I don't know. Yeah, especially really if it's finance.
I really like that idea.
Do you want to add?
No, I'm just still thinking. Maybe we can chat about that later.
Yeah, and as for the movements, I think we have enough movements. We don't need to create new ones, I would say.
I think the same. And I think inside the movement we should get all the mad people to like raise their voices and be heard, and to change our structures so that the people can participate, because I think there are many people who right now can't participate because of the structures, how we as I say healthy people, I don't know, like people who can run with the system more or less fine, can, like, that we change our structures so that people give in their knowledge.
Well, when it comes to therapists and counselors, again, at the very least, I think that there should be some sort of movement, at least locally there, for people to come together. I think it's really important. It's just too fragmented, too isolated, and people feel alone.
You mean mental health
practitioners? Mental health professionals, yeah.
Do you have, for example, in the climate change movement, we have Psychologists for Future, who, for example, give like free therapies to climate change activists, climate justice activists. Do you have something like that in the UK or in Lithuania?
Not sure.
because I could also think that therapists are also normal people, like normal people, but also like
Thank you.
You're welcome. But people
And it took us 2 hours to say that.
no, but also people who have the stuff they care about and not just about their labor, their work. So, yeah, I think I know some psychotherapists who got politicized by the climate change and by saying, okay, I want to use my my work, what I'm good at, to help those activists. And I think there's could also be a way if they be like, oh, I know, then just ask them what is important to you. And maybe they can creep into the other movement sectors and help out there.
And another thing, it's not my idea. Again, Vogue Scientist on Instagram, she was like, what if we organize ourselves not against something, but for something? That was her question for the left, actually, We're against sexism, against misogyny, against LGBT phobia, but maybe we can find like some goal that would be worth fighting for. It's not to say that fighting against that shit is bad, because it is good, but again, maybe we can find some common goal which could incorporate then the climate rights activists, the mental health activists, stuff like that. What could that be?
Yeah,
a livable life?
On that point, I miss having a dream like that. I mean, cause, for example, it feels like it's almost for certain that we're gonna go to Mars at some point. I mean, was there a meeting where we agreed to do that? But we're building rockets and just researching the terrains and the whatever, and we're gonna go to Mars at some point. Like, but what is the dream in terms of mental health? Like, how, 100 years from now, what do we want? How do we want
That's actually a very good grounds for organizing. It could be.
And I have a vision, like abstractly what you said. So like for what we could mobilize and what we're for, like for having more time and safer spaces that accommodate different needs. I think that's
and that could include like basically everybody from every different movement.
And I think I would just go with that as like. For me, as a very good conclusion, because like visions are so powerful, and I think we often forget about that power and how it can mobilize more people. To know, to have a vision and to have something to work for. The work is maybe the not a good word in that sense.
Fight for.
Fight for is a good word. Yeah, to fight for.
And it always has to be the kids, because that's popular. If you say that, we're fighting for the kids, maybe, for a better future for the kids.
In Germany, there's a song called Think About the Kids. And
so, let's do it.
Last remark, and I'm going to wrap.
I don't know. I'm thinking of wrapping up, maybe, because how much public speaking can an innocent person take? It's been... No, I'm joking, but yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much. I think this discussion hasn't ended, and we have a bit slightly different approaches, different experience, but also similar visions. And how to mobilize around mental health is still an open question. And let's hope we manage to integrate it into our political agendas and movements. And for the work week and collective gardening should be on our agendas, I think.
Also, gardening shall not be forced on people, because what I heard, if it's a big trouble for you, don't do that, please. You have to love it.
Thank you. Oh my God. Thank you. Paulius Garmus, Elena Gasiulytė, Marivi Bauer, Monika Višnevska.
Thank you, Monika.